You're listening to the Armada EW Podcast with your host Tom Withington at the controls. Today we are joined by Jim Kilgallen, President of COMINT Consulting. Jim's had a long and distinguished career in the intelligence and electronic warfare domains, both in government and in the private sector. Jim, welcome to the podcast. There's a lot of discussion at the moment in the SIGINT community about how we use COMINT and the challenges this brings. Can we meet these challenges with training or with doctrine, for example? Where do you think the effort should fall?
I think I've seen some flashes of answer, and I'll start on the systems and the engineering side. I worked with a particular U.S. Navy office, Navy Surface Warfare office, that was basically looking at the spectrum holistically. And now, to go off into the engineering tangent for a moment, there are a lot of wideband tuners out there in the market that can bring in huge swaths of spectrum. And so they were conceptualizing a system that brought in all RF. And then their system, if you picture a highway or a railroad with stations or with off-ramps, they had basically off-ramped portions of the spectrum or things found in the spectrum of interest to different offices. So the spectrum warfare people would be the first offload, or the frequency management, the communications planners, the people that did deconfliction of own forces communications or friendly forces communications, they would get a cut at it. Of course, the intelligence people got a cut at it, and so on. I thought that was actually a pretty neat, pretty straightforward way of trying to give everybody the same thing. You basically design a system that brings in the whole thing and then gives it to people in the form and flavor they'd like for all the different uses. There's a lot of applications out there. So now to go to the training and doctrinal side, well, the engineers that I see nowadays, they're young and they're different flavor from the folks I first came in with, a lot of whom you'll see at these electronic warfare conferences have some form of radio in their background. These were folks that were inspired by guys like Art Collins of Collins Aerospace, or were ex-amateur radio operators, and so inherently understood propagation or what a coax cable was, and so on. And all that stuff is still relevant, still vital to us. You can have a lot of wireless things, but trust me on this, there's still an antenna, there's still a cable, there's still probably preamplification, filtering, all those basics, and propagation to consider. But there's been this overemphasis on the sexy technology of the moment, in my view, cell phones or smartphones at the moment, but over recent years, you can go back to cell phones or PCM microwave or, whatever the hot technology was of great interest to the intelligence community. And, we tended to train to that and hire to that task rather than bring in people who were, RF savvy, who could adapt quickly if the guy moved from the cyber, from the Wi-Fi cafe and moved back over to, say, a VHF, UHF walkie-talkie using a variant of DMR, and you had to capture them that way. So you've got an engineer who can grasp the techniques, but has no practical experience in the RF world. So that's a challenge. I think it's doctrinal. It's in the training pipeline that I think we're all facing it in NATO. You got kids that are coming in, or youth that are coming in that are smart engineers, but they don't think broadly enough, and it's really to our detriment. SIGINT is absolutely vital to Western civilian and military leadership.
You talked a little bit about the younger men and women coming into the SIGINT community who perhaps haven't been quite so familiar with the near-peer side of things and dealing with COMINT on that level, as well as ensuring that we keep up the effort against less sophisticated adversaries, if you will.
I think we have to develop a broader awareness that we've fallen behind in RF SIGINT for the reasons I've already outlined, that we've spent too much time looking at the sexy technology of the moment, and being capitalist countries in the West, we tend to follow the money, right? So the money gets invested in the thing that we need to most invest in, which is the infrastructure to attack the cyber problem. But there's an interface to RF again. And then there's also still all of the other RF. I was quoting some examples earlier of some things going on in HF, but VHF, UHF. I use the example of the DMR radio. We all see the evening news. You see at least this guy with the DMR radio Velcro to his flak jacket. Well, hello, there it is right there. And these are radios that, bridge that gap between traditional RF and then where these new folks are more comfortable operating, the new folks coming into our community in the cyber world, because the DMR radio is really quite sophisticated. Yes, it's a walkie-talkie to you and I, but it also has an interface that allows networking, allows a private network to be set up, allows somebody to actually get on the internet too, or to get on a private, intranet. And this is, a $50 firmware download. They modify the radio and they set up their own network that doesn't conform to a standard anymore. And so, this is an area of concern as well. And I'm not trying to pick on my rivals in this market, because in many ways we eclipse them in some of the things we do. We decode at a rate that's just tremendous compared to all the other SIGINT software firms in the market. There's something like 13 times more new decoders we build each year than all of them combined, which sounds very impressive. But the problem with that figure is it's not enough. So, I'm trying to be very candid about that. And when you face a problem like that DMR problem that I mentioned, and a group or a cell, can download a piece of firmware, modify their own network, and then, the rival companies out there produce a solution to that DMR standard, but the targets aren't using that anymore. They're using a variant that you can no longer read. That's dangerous. There's a lot of, so there's the, I guess what I'm trying to do is split hairs a little bit in my commentary on what's gone wrong. So we've spent too much time focusing on the sexy technology at the moment, too much money probably as well. But I'll leave that analysis for somebody else. And too much focus on, it's all got to be in cyber. You can't force your target into a medium. You've got to go where they go. They're going to adapt. They're going to use whatever means gets them by. Carrier pigeons, messengers, fiber, cable. I mean, look at the Zetas. The very violent narco trafficking group in northwest Mexico, out in Sinaloa, Sonora areas. These guys have set up dedicated, sophisticated communication systems completely away from public infrastructure, including microwave links to go across the border that they consider throwaway systems. We're talking about $500,000, $1 million systems that are throwaway systems to manage their logistics. And that's what we need to be facing. We need to face the reality of the world, not, build some system and hope they come to it. You know what I mean? And that's what a lot of so you've got the de-emphasis of the rest of RF to some extent in SIGINT, or the lack of familiarity, which we started realizing post 9/11 as a Western community. I'm not speaking about just the U.S. As a West, we started realizing, there's all this other RF. Well, of course, it never changed. Nobody sent this memo to all of the radio manufacturers out there in the world. And there are a lot of them. There's really good radios being made in places like Namibia. There's SDR has changed things. So there's a lot of good radios, and there's a lot of capabilities that can be varied and to give people a capability to communicate the way they want to in the area they're in, whether it's urban, suburban, or completely devoid of infrastructure. And so that's what SIGINT has to face. It has to be able to, react and have tools that can deal with the reality. And so that naturally extends to the people. The people have to be trained to a blend of, where the young folks that are coming in are with the IT side of things, and with the folks of your and my age, which, we're more RF savvy. We need both. And the way the future is looking to all of us in the community, both of those traits really need to be in the same person, because soon they're going to be, I think with a palette, like an artist palette in front of them of actions to take. Do I deny this network? Do I suppress it? Do I confuse it? Or do I exploit it for the intelligence? I think all that's going to be in one person, not in the SIGINT officer and the EW officer anymore. People are trying to wrestle with that topic now. So yeah, one person in the future is going to be just attacking, and I don't mean that in the EW sense, but one person is going to be, seeking communications wherever they are for whatever purposes most suit our needs.
There's an interesting paradigm that we're in at the moment, that the skill set is changing, and we have to de-fetishize the technology in order to exploit the fact that the skill set's changing and to foster this idea of the EW professional with this set of skills.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you raised maybe inadvertently a couple more questions. I mean, I won't say that I see the convergence happening, but I won't say that I agree with it 100%. I think both disciplines have a lot of nuance that are going to take a long time to put in one person. The SIGINT in particular, has so much nuance, subtleties and fragile little data points and things that we depend on to recognize things as they are, as threat or of interest or not of interest and so on. And I don't know how you get that in one person's head. And this is where I think the common answer is, well, AI. Okay, I do believe and know that AI can make up for some of it. Our software employs AI and has for a long time. in a lot of heuristic and neural network type decision making that we do inside the software to aid a less experienced analyst or operator. We've already read the tea leaves years ago, a decade ago or more, and saw this happening, that we had a lesser skilled, a less RF savvy operator analyst. So we had to overcome that with AI. Now, of course, AI is trendy. And again, my fear comes in that we're going to just pour a lot of money into AI. Maybe that'll be good. There's no doubt that a lot of the nuance, as I call it, of SIGINT can be handled by some AI routines, but they also need to be continually updated. I mean, in my company, and where I was talking about earlier, the need between HF, VHF, and UHF alone, the three busiest portions of spectrum in terms of communications, there's somewhere around 90 to 120 new waveforms needed each year that are needed, or solutions, decoders, full demodulator, decoder, parser chain is needed each year. The community as a whole, against my company, produces something like 2.3 new solutions per year. I mean, it's appallingly poor. My company is producing 30 something more a year because, we formed specifically to address that gap. My biggest concern every day is how to get to 40 or 50. But that needs to be someone's concern. I don't want to, argue for the establishment of an AI czar in the community, but really someone is going to have to, imagine and give some thought to processes that continue to make AI better. AI is only as good as the input. And I can tell you right now, it's very, very difficult, to stay on top of the continually changing communications environment. On the other side of things, on the EW side, this is where, again, that person I don't believe is going to be easy to find either. And I'm not, I'm an ex-Navy guy, I'll admit it, but I'm not picking on the flyers per se, but there's a perception amongst aviators and a lot of people in the EW community by the SIGINT side of things that they just can. And that's all we do, even when it's a perfectly good source of intelligence. And there's a balance to be found there. And that's nuance too. Sometimes it might be better to take some modicum of control of a network, make them all look left while you go past them on the right, so they go back to work and they're unaware of your capability. When you jam them, they know you're there. I mean, it's, you get to do that once and they're sensitized, right? They're aware. You force them into some other medium. And of course, sometimes that's, a beautiful thing. But, these are the things that I don't think that all the fora that I've participated in the last few years are really, really fleshing out. I mean, people are talking about it. There's some polemics, arguments get heated. One side says this, another side says this is the other. But ultimately, it's an awful lot of detail to be wrangled with. And, against the backdrop of a dynamic environment, the advent of DSP and FPGA chips and so on are allowing people to load a waveform on the fly, go out and use it for a few days, and then they go away, maybe never using that waveform again. They ran their operation and they discard that waveform. How does AI even begin to respond to that? It may see it. It may recognize it as something new. We may spend a lot of time and money demodulating, decoding it, and then never see it again. That's the stuff that is not being talked about.
Jim, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you today. And I think I can safely say it's certainly given our listeners a lot of food for thought as well. And something tells me that a lot of the debates and the issues that you've raised, we're going to be chewing on for quite some time yet. And we will be revisiting them very frequently as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom.
That's all we've got time for now, but be sure to visit armadainternational.com/electronic warfare for more EW news and analysis. Thanks for listening.